So my story starts with the Shah of Afghanistan. He's the guy on the right with JFK. He was 14 years old when he came into power. His father was assassinated. He was the boy king, as you might figure. He had a very interesting idea about Afghanistan. He wanted to modernize it, but he also understood that it would take a long time and that people weren't ready for it. He was in power about 40 years, a little more than 40 years, until the gentleman on the left, his name is Dawood Khan. He also had ideas about modernizing Afghanistan, but you can say he fell in with the wrong crowd. He actually developed some fascist ideas. That was supposed to be funny. So he decided that he kind of wanted to put an end to monarchy, and he launched the first coup d'etat and overthrew the king, exiled him to Italy, and took power, and he became the first president of Afghanistan. And he was in power about 4 to 6 years. And you might be thinking, well, that's a really good story. First of all, I should tell you the first coup d'etat was actually a family feud. These two guys are cousins. Do you now see the family resemblance? Yeah. The second thing I should tell you is these two knuckleheads are actually my relatives. Yeah. So Nawab is actually a title, and my last name, Nawabi, means descendant of royalty. So for 250 years, my family has ruled Afghanistan. Yeah, very humble beginnings. Okay, this is... the gentleman on the left that I told you about, well, you know what they say, what goes around comes around? Well, he launched a coup d'etat, took a power away. Well, the same thing happened to him, except he wasn't exiled to Italy like the king was. His entire family was killed off. And we would have been too had we been in the palace that night. Luckily, we weren't. So this started the Russian invasion. The puppet government took control. Anybody that was related to the king was basically targets, and we were going to be, if we were found, we would be killed. So I essentially became a refugee. I dressed exactly like that girl that you see. So did my sisters. My mom actually donned one of those things called a burqa. And we fled Afghanistan. It took 7 days through the back roads, and we went to Pakistan. So when I was 12, I came to America as a refugee. Growing up, I wanted to be her. In case you don't know her, her name is Anusha Ansari. She's the first Iranian woman to go to outer space, and she did it with her own money, which is really badass, if you ask me. She started a company. She's even currently if anybody's heard of the X Prize, she's the founder of X Prize. So it was such an honor to actually meet her. When I was little, I was very similar to her in that sense that I would look at the skies and I would wonder if there was someone like me out there. I would wonder if there was little girls, what they were, what they ate. I would ask like all these questions of all these adults, and they would look at me and go, "You need help." But this never left me. So when I came to America, I really wanted to become an astronaut. So I enrolled in aeronautical engineering. And yes, I work in aerospace today. So, but when I got to my calculus class, I was waitlisted, and a very nice professor told me that I should be home bare feet and pregnant. And these little things happened throughout, to the point where in my 4th year, I actually dropped out of aeronautical engineering. And this dream of mine almost came to an end. And it did, actually, because I quit. I listened to everybody who said, oh, you should be a teacher. I did become a teacher. I hated it. So I had an opportunity to go and work for 8 weeks as an intern at Lockheed Martin Space Systems. And it was the best thing that ever happened. I don't know how, but somehow I convinced a vice president that I was worthy of hire. And I was hired. This is a genuine bona fide satellite that I worked on. I can't tell you what it does. I really don't want to go to jail for 250 years, but it's in orbit today, and it does work. But I want to tell you that the second time my dream almost came to an end, I actually had what you can call a negative experience with a cowboy. And in a moment of sheer desperation, I walked into somebody's office, I closed the door, and I blurted out, "Mr. Hayes, you're black." And he sat back, chuckled, and said, "Thanks for pointing the obvious." And I said, "Sorry, Mr. Hayes, I meant African American." He was like, "No, black was fine." And feeling even more mortified, I just launched into my story, and I said, "So this is what happened, and you think I'm crazy?" And he said, "No, I understand the black comment." He said, "I need to gather my thoughts. We'll sit quietly here." And what felt like eternity to me, he actually told me, "I still need to think about this." And I was like, "Okay." And then finally he said, "Well, you're not crazy. What happened to you shouldn't happen to you, so you can take that." So I was really happy to hear that part. And he said, "You're an oddball, but that's okay, because I'm an oddball, and I think the universe wants us to work together." And so we did. He became my mentor, and he didn't go, ride a white horse and charge into anybody's office. What he did was the things that I had forgotten about myself, and he really, truly reminded me of what that was. And he made me do things like read Micro Inequalities and Microaggressions by Steve Young, not the football player. He made me reread Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Successful People, and he drilled in me the whole circle of influence thing. Oh my God, did he drill it in my head. Towards the end, he was retiring, so I sat down with him in his last lunch that I had with him, and I said, "So, Mr. Hayes, you got some words of advice?" He said, "Yeah, I do. You belong in a bigger stage. And I hope I'm alive to see it, but if I'm not, I'll be watching you." The last time I talked to Mr. Hayes, he was about to get on a plane. He had retired. He was enjoying retirement. And he said, "Well, I'm about to get on a plane. I'm going to be traveling for a while. I'll call you back. But remember, why be ordinary when you could be extraordinary?" Those were his last words shortly after he passed away. But what I realized Mr. Hayes did was actually prepare me for the bigger stage. He laid down the foundation. And today, as you heard, I run the largest LeanIn Circle, and I get to do the work that he did with me, with other women. And when I read Charlotte Sandberg's book, the last page says, "What would you do if you weren't afraid?" And for me, empowering others was something that I wanted to do, and I was going to do that work despite of being afraid. So I leave you with, what one action are you going to take? And please remember, what would you do if you weren't afraid?